It's the eve of December 25th. And what are we going to talk about in our Noahide class? Why we left JC. Let's expose the light from the darkness, the truth from the lies. So tonight is the eve of December 25th, in case you didn't realize. That actually plays a significant role in the life of a Torah Jew and in the life of a Noahide, because this is the only night of the year that we do not study Torah. We do not learn from sunset of December 24th until what will be the Jewish midnight. For those X number of hours, it was about 4 in Chicago, giving you Chicago time. Every place is slightly different, of course, sunset. But in Chicago, it was 4:22. And then I believe Jewish midnight is about 11:48 tonight. So for those 7.5 hours, we do not learn Torah. We can pray the evening prayer, but we don't do anything else of Torah, which is a very huge thing. And I was actually thinking tonight, it feels very like, I don't know how to put it, weird. You never realize how much Torah is just embedded in your life until you're not allowed to learn it. And the only other time that we have anything close is on the saddest day of the year, the 9th of Av, which is the day when the temple was destroyed twice, some 490 years apart. The same day, and many other horrific tragedies happened to the Jewish people. And because that's such a sad day, we're very restricted in what Torah we can learn. But we can always learn some Torah. Because on the 9th of Av, we could learn some sad pieces, like the book of Job, Eicha, certain portions of the Talmud that describe the destruction of the temple. So certain sad pieces that connect to Moed Katan, the laws of mourning, sad parts of Torah we're allowed to learn. But general Torah we're not allowed to learn because Torah gives us joy, and it's not a day we're supposed to feel joy. But tonight, from 4:22 until 11:48 in Chicago, we're not supposed to learn anything. Nothing. Not even those sadder pieces of Torah that we're allowed to learn on the 9th of Av. We're still not allowed to learn them tonight. It is the only time that we are not allowed to learn anything. And the reason for that is because Torah gives vitality. Torah gives energy. Torah brings godliness into the world. And this night, which spiritually speaking is associated with the religion, this man-made religion that has created so much evil for the Jewish people, we refrain from Torah study to not give it vitality. Which means in different parts of the world, this occurs on different days. It's not like a Torah concept, the eve of December 25th. Obviously, Torah dates are in the Jewish calendar, not in the secular. It is where this holiday, it is where in the world you are when this holiday is celebrated. So, for example, I know in Russia, in the Greek Orthodox calendar, it's a different date, which would mean that would be the date that the Jews in that area would not study Torah, because Torah brings godliness into the world. And on this night, when the energy all around us is an energy of this holiday, we are not giving that holiday vitality. We are not giving vitality to such an evil, and therefore we do not learn to avoid giving vitality to that evil. So I was in a bit of a dilemma last week, thinking, are we going to have class or not? On one hand, it should have been simple. No, we won't have class. We can't say any words of Torah. We won't have class. Then I was like, I don't know, for Noahides, that just didn't seem right not to have a class for Noahides on the eve of December 25th. I felt that's exactly a time when we should have a class for Noahides. So therefore, I said, so what can we talk about? And I thought we could definitely talk about the reason why people saw the falseness in Christianity. I thought that's a very appropriate topic for tonight. So we could definitely discuss that. And then we could discuss other such relevant topics that all would be perfectly permissible to talk about. So that is the backstory for people wondering on the theme of tonight. So we can start with that question, if you will, because not all Noahides, but many Noahides started off as real Christians, as versus what I might call cultural Christians, as most of America is, but most Noahides start off as real Christians. And then something made them realize that this is not the truth. So I thought it's very appropriate tonight to combat the energy around us by people vocalizing how they realized it's not the truth. Who would like to start? Julie.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
All right. So I would say from around 2012 to 2018, I was going through constant struggles and losing jobs and bad relationships. And around 2018, after about 6 years of struggle, I was in a position again where I lost my job. I lost 3 automobiles and 3 jobs in 2018. So I had to do some really deep searching, and I think I had come out of sort of a influence of the Pentecostal church where you're hearing things and speaking weird tongues, which I don't believe in that, but I was just hearing a word over and over, and it was a Russian word, and I'm not fluent in Russian at all. So when I looked it up, I found online a Russian Bible, and I'm looking in it, and I had many different versions of the Bible. I had a Messianic Bible, I had a Jehovah's Witness Bible and the regular King James, but I was noticing how in the New Testament for Jehovah's Witness, they have Jehovah all throughout it, all throughout. And I guess they're assuming that this is the word for the Yod He Vav He, but it's not in any of the other Bibles that have ever been in existence from antiquity. So I got to thinking, well, then the Bible, the New Testament must be wrong, you know. I came to that conclusion, and I just sort of struggled with just having that knowledge here in my hand and not doing anything about it for about 2 years. And then in 2020, I started watching Tovia Singer, and don't really live in an area where I'm connected to any Noahide, so I just continue to watch videos, and I did attempt to make a conversion class with a rabbi. But once again, I'm in a moment in my life where I'm without a vehicle and without a job. So I'm just hanging on here by the internet.
Wow, wow,
Yeah.
wow, 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 wow. So what made you realize the falseness of the New Testament was the fact that one version could write it like this and one version could write it like this. So you're like, wait,
Yeah.
so there's no
Yeah.
absolute truth if people could just write whatever they want.
No, you can't translate Yod He Vav He to Greek. You just can't do it.
So
Not
that's what
possible.
made you realize that this is false because there's all these different versions. So that's false. If it was true, they'd all have the same version.
Right, right. And I doubt if it would have been written in Greek.
Right. And then
Yeah.
from
I
there, you
mean,
explored and you found Tovia Singer, and then his
yeah.
classes sort of smashed the rest of your understanding of Christianity from you.
Right, right. There's just so many. I mean, when I learned about how many times Jesus committed sins and what he was supposed to do as a Jew, what he was not supposed to do, and he went through and cited all the times when he was not a perfect human being, like they say.
So that made you realize, no, this is false.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And from there, you have your internet. Now you're
Right. Yeah, I'm hanging on by the
hanging
internet.
on by the internet, and then thank God this class is on Zoom, so that works.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's good. No vehicle. It's no problem. We've been meeting virtually since we started, and that was a long time ago, way before 2020. And we still were meeting virtually then in a different forum, but we're still meeting virtually. All right, Corey. I'm just looking down my list on here, so I know everyone has a different setup on their screen. Corey, what about you? What was your pivotal understand made you realize?
A long story, so trying to sum it up here. I wasn't raised religious, and then I met my husband whose family was Pentecostal, and at that point I wanted to become a Christian. And so as far as like the holidays go, at that point they started having different meaning for me. And so then in, I don't know, probably 2008, I met a family who had just came out of the Christian church, And, she was talking about how Christmas and Easter not honoring God in any way. And I wanted to understand that, because that time in my life, that really why I was doing what I was doing, or at least that the meaning behind it. So that was probably the first time in my life that I really looked up things on my own. So looking up the origins of Christmas and Easter, stuff like that, it really didn't seem any different than Halloween origins. And a lot of Christians, won't celebrate Halloween, but they're fine with the other stuff. And, so it opened a door to a lot. I was looking at a lot of information, and it honestly, right then, it didn't make me want to celebrate any of that anymore, because I didn't like the idea of how it started out and how it has changed, even though that's not what I was doing. The origins of it to me are important, on where it came from and the meaning behind it. So I just looked more and more into it. And, so then, that opened the door about Christianity in general and the church, and a lot of the falsehood behind all of it. And so that brought us out of the church, and then realized, we were in like this Hebrew roots messianic type movement from there, because, JC was our foundation. So you kind of work your way backwards. So then we started adding, the Old Testament. But then, then I started listening to Tovia Singer. So, yeah. So that right there helped answer a lot of things to where I stopped. And you really have to just, go back to the very beginning and start from there and move forward, instead of, working your way backwards and adding to. So I had to kind of wipe the slate clean and, do even more research and look into things my own, because I'm just seeking truth. And a lot of it didn't make sense when you actually start looking at it and you look at the Hebrew and, the Jewish perspective of it. It just dots just start connecting all over the place. That's what did it. So it was just seeking truth, and it just leads you all over the place. But
So you see how God puts each person. So for Julie, the fact that she had these various New Testaments is what made her realize there's something off here. And for you, Corey, God sent someone to you to put a question in your mind, and you're an inquisitive seeker of truth. So once you had that question, you just couldn't give it up, and you kept researching. And the more you researched, the more you said, no, this is off, and let me find what's correct. And that was how God helped you come to truth. That was how God brought you to where you are today, which is a very long journey. Very, very, very long journey. That's for sure. Dixie.
Okay. You've heard this 100 times.
Well, just give us a condensed version, because what we're really focusing on, and I view it as a very spiritual thing right now, is people expressing, each one in their own way, the falseness of Christianity and how they realize that and where that took them to. So I think it's a very appropriate thing to do tonight, which is why we're doing it.
You're right. It's awesome. It's a perfect thing to do on a night like this. I'll start with Jack and I, because before that, I was in Christianity, but not solid. I mean, we were kids, and my parents had taken us to church a few times. And then we started rodeoing, and the church went behind. And so anyway, after Jack and I were married, he had been to church off and on, but we were at the rodeo at Cheyenne, and when the clown made the altar call, Jack stood up, which shocked me, and took all the kids, and we went down and did what they do, and ended up that we met some friends at a retreat, ended up at a Pentecostal church at first, and they stayed our friends all of our life. In fact, they're dear friends, and when they passed even. And anyway, we ended up with that. And then that church, I forgot what happened to it, but anyway, they became, then Ted Haggard came to town, and some friends wanted us to go there, and that became New Life Church, which became the biggest church in Colorado Springs, about 15,000 people. Jack was on the board. We were quite high up in all the churches we were in. Everybody loved Jack. I mean, Jack was the most amazing man in the world, and when Jack did something, he did it wholeheartedly. And we were going to New Life at that time. He was on the board. And then a friend of ours was working with Jack. Well, at that time, he wasn't a friend. He was a Jewish man who invited Jack and I to his Jewish wedding. And so we'd never seen a Jewish wedding. Well, come to find out, he was a Jewish Christian in a sense. But the wedding was Jewish. It was quite impressive. And then we kind of lost track of him after that. Well, then about 3 or 4 years later, our daughter-in-law gives us a book that he had wrote. And at this time, we were in New Life Church. And I was excited. And Jack said, well, I said, should I ask him if he would come do a Bible study at our house? And so he agreed to. We had about 30 people come to our house, which most of them came out of New Life Church. And that's where the problem started. The pastor, with what he was teaching us compared to Christianity, it just turned Christianity inside out. It was how anti-Semitic it was. It was unbelievable. And so they had a synagogue in town, Messianic, of course, a little one, and he invited us to go. Well, Jack wouldn't go at first. I was going, and then he was going to church on Sunday. And finally, he decided to come a few times with me, and then he did start going there instead of the church. Well, excuse me. When, then him and his wife got a divorce, and he came to live with us. And he said for a month. Well, it ended up 6 months. But he knew the Bible front and back. I mean, it's like you Jews do. I mean, your memories are on beyond belief. And we got such a big taste of Judaism. It was just unbelievable.
This was a Jew who was a practicing Messianic Christian.
Yes.
But
yes.
even as such, he managed to make you realize the falseness of Christianity.
Well, he didn't do that. Basically, he gave us the taste of Judaism that made us understand how wrong Christianity was, is what he did. And to cut to the chase, we ended up, we had the synagogue folded up because they couldn't afford it. They ended up having it at our house right here downstairs. We had about 30, 35 people. His wife was teaching Hebrew and stuff. It was wonderful. But then it ended up by the time it ended up 3 families. And they bought land from us. So they would come here one Saturday, Shabbat, and then we would go there and then to the other family. And that went on for quite a few years. But this is where we learned that Christianity was wrong, because we had one Sabbath off. So Jack and I always read everything together, but we would study Torah on that Saturday. Well, when you compare it to the New Testament, we would sit here and go, this is a lie. That's what the other people kept saying, well, that was Messiah. And we'd say, Jack and I looked at each other and said, that's not what it says. And so basically, they kind of didn't believe like we did. And then the rabbi from Israel came to the house because we had a Torah scroll. The men read from the Torah scroll and everything. And when the rabbi from Israel come, I didn't even realize, we didn't believe a rabbi would even come in our house. And he did. He had another rabbi bring him, and he wanted to see the horses, and he did. You know, we took him to the barn and everything. Well, he kept in touch with us, and he wanted us to convert, because he said, you're not following, you know, you're not typical message. You're nothing but basically following Judaism, and you don't, you know, believe like everybody else does. But Jack wasn't ready, and so I said, I can't until Jack's ready. And long story short is that's how, by studying with each other, we came to the realization by ourselves. I mean, we listened to a lot of rabbis, don't get me wrong and everything, but, and like Rabbi Katz, that, you know, when I met you, that's where he was. And he's the one that really, really brought us out, was Rabbi Katz. But by listening and studying with ourselves, we came out of Christianity and knew that no man can forgive our sins. We've always believed that. And that was the stumbling block when we were in Christianity, is you can't tell me that somebody can forgive my sins. And that's where Jack was. And so basically, and then it just, we just ended up where we are, you know? And
So what you're saying is this, you were entrenched in Christianity, and this Jew who unfortunately fell into being a Messianic Christian, he connected with you and gave you a taste of something truer because of his own Jewishness, and that made you feel that Christianity wasn't really true or wasn't rich enough or deep enough or real enough. So you followed him, and then by following him, somehow to starting to study Torah yourself. And as you studied Torah and compared it to the Christian texts, you're like, this is true and this is false, because they're not jiving. And if they're not jiving, if you're saying the New Testament, but really the New Testament isn't in Torah. So it should have been the Old Testament that you would see as like, wait, what we call the Old Testament is really not Torah's version of the Old Testament.
No, we were studying the Kamash. That's what we were doing.
Right.
We were through the Messianic, and but when you read the Kamash and you remember your teaching from the New Testament, you would go and say, what the New Testament said was wrong. We weren't comparing them. We were remembering from what we had been taught in Christianity.
So you're saying, looking at Torah, it's like, wait, if this is what Torah says, and officially Torah is the roots of Christianity, then obviously Christianity is false because it's a tremendous distortion of those roots. So exactly. It was really your studying of Torah is what led you out. So it was your own studying of Torah led you out.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that's how most people come out and stay out, is because our family came out, but they went back because they didn't do it themselves. Yeah, but Rabbi, like I said, and Rabbi Katz had the huge part to play in that, and Russell Kirk and all those, Mike Matlich, all of them, because we had them to lean on and to learn from and to get the true Torah from. So, you know, it's just by Hashem putting it in the solid teachers in front of us and teaching us that, yeah, this is all wrong. Look, 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 look. It was a no-brainer.
Well, it was a tremendous commitment, maybe a no-brainer, but a lot of commitment, to truth.
And it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it's hard because you start out and then you question yourself, and then, you know, it's like, are we sure? Is this correct? We've lived this all of our lives, and how can it be wrong? You know, in fact, last night, I got a call from a guy that was so nice. He came and fixed my refrigerator, and come to find out, he's a Christian, and he spent an hour and a half trying to get me back to Christianity. And I kept saying, you're wasting your breath. I am not going back to a false religion. And he's the nicest man in the world. And I have lost so many friends, some of my best friends. I mean, they don't even speak to me anymore. It's horrible. But you know, I'm never going back.
What you're saying reminds me of a woman that was very, very, very connected to the class for a long time, and then afterwards stopped coming. But I remember her saying what made her realize was because she was such a devout Christian that her mother-in-law, who was so proud of her devout daughter-in-law, gave her a real original, like Tanakh, like the original Hebrew English Tanakh, a real one. And then as she started studying it, because she knew the other one so well, she's like, wait, something's off. These verses aren't the same. Something's off. And then she sort of had this sense of like, this is what I'm thinking, like yours. She's like, wait, am I crazy or is the whole world crazy? How could I know something that nobody else in the world ever figured out? How could I be the only one to realize that these verses are not correct? And it's going through that period. And as you're saying, a period of sort of like, just got to stick with the truth. And even if the whole world is like the emperor's new clothes, the whole world is going on one game. But if this is the truth, we sacrifice for truth. And I guess that's maybe a quality of all Noahides, is to sacrifice for truth, because of course it's a sacrifice.
Yeah, you're going to lose friends, you're going to lose family and everything else. I literally am alone in this big town. There is no others. It's ridiculous. But one thing I want to say real quick, what happens is when you read Psalms that are like in the Christian Bible, and then you read Psalms in like the Art Scroll, the new one, they're incredible. And they read so different, because that's what he was trying to do last night to me. And it's like, no, let's read it out of the Tanakh. And it's totally different. And so, see, that's what they go on in Christianity. It's false.
So maybe you opened up his eyes.
No. Oh, God, no. I was like, let's just get off the
phone. You never know. You never know. You never know. Natalie?
I'm glad everybody else went first. That gave me time to kind of, mine feels like a long story too, even though it wasn't that long period of time. It was, God definitely put all the right elements together in the right order. Back a little ways, it's like I had questions of Christianity even as a little kid, right? And the answer is typically things, when you find something that doesn't make sense, the answer from like my parents, my teachers, my pastors, who are very intelligent people, don't get me wrong, were things like, maybe I don't know the answer, but incredibly smart people, PhDs in theology, have studied this for 2,000 years. I'm sure somebody has an answer somewhere. Don't worry about it. Kind of answers. And I can remember one Christmas Eve, we always had a Christmas Eve service at the church. It was an evangelical, non-denominational church. Pastor was an incredibly intelligent man. He had a yardstick, and he was trying to explain how JC could be both God, fully God, and fully man. So he had God on a sign on one end of the yardstick and man on the bottom end, and he would flip it like, okay, here in this verse, he's fully man, and he'd flip the other way. Here in this verse, he's fully God. And he was going through the whole sermon. It was like an hour-long sermon. They always were long. And he's flipping it back and forth, and he's back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. And you could just see he's getting frustrated up there giving the sermon. And as a little kid, it's like, this was supposed to make it clearer? It did not. But I can remember that as a little kid, him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So fast forward to my best friend in high school was raised in Noahide. When we were in high school, she went to Israel, couldn't wait to go back. She went back, she did an Orthodox conversion. She's getting married. So my husband and I go to Israel and stay out there for a few days to attend her wedding. And we were staying with these Orthodox families. And we actually were staying next door. We were sleeping next door. The rabbi that lived next door to them had to rent an entire apartment just for his library, a 2-bedroom apartment, floor-to-ceiling books in every room, on every wall, down the hallway. It was just an apartment of books. It's like, and nobody had a TV. So clearly there was something here. And when you're around people, when you've been told your whole life that nobody can fulfill the whole law, that's why JC had to come, is because that nobody could do the law. And then you're living with people who are doing it and having a fabulous time and have such a strong community. It was like, oh, maybe there's something is not connecting here, right? So somewhere, somehow, we're not connected. So then we come home, and tragically, my grandmother died unexpectedly. And they had been part of this church that we grew up in since it had started, maybe 40 years. The pastor at that church had been there 35 years, right? When my grandma passed away, she knew everybody. She was always there for everybody. When she passed away, nobody was there for my grandpa. It was tragic. Tragic. It was awful. That hit hard. When we came home and my husband, who was not raised Christian, started to have some questions about JC. His answers from pastors, the pastor at the church that we went to once we were married up north, we stopped going. We were driving an hour each way to attend this church, and we just kind of stopped going. Nobody noticed. And we'd been there for 4 years. And it wasn't that big of a church. It was like maybe 200 people. Nobody noticed. Our friends, nothing. So it was like, ouch. He started asking questions, and I was getting mad at him for asking questions. And his answers from like our pastors were like, read the Gospels. That was it, in a text message, read the Gospels. It was like, that doesn't answer it. People that we knew, very intelligent, studied their whole lives, used things like J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter series as examples of why JC was, because if she can sprinkle clues in the first book and fulfill them in the last book, so can God. But that's not really? Okay. So then like I said, our best friends who are in Israel, who are Orthodox, who actually happen to know Rabbi Michael Skobac, who is part of, or he runs Jews for Judaism, sent us a video on Noahides. Mm-hmm. And we watched it. We're like, oh, and then of course, then your recommendations are all of his counter arguments to every Christian missionary proof text. And we started going through them. And I got mad. I got mad at my husband. I thought that he had watched all of these and then asked me the questions and like set me up to fail, because it answered every question. The questions I'd had as a little kid. Here he is, like you said, quoting chapter and verse of Christian doctrine, he's got everything off the top of his head. We watched loads of Tovia Singer videos too. Same thing. It was like, I've never met a Christian who can quote the Bible, New or Old Testament, like this. I mean, New Testament to some extent, but not like this. And so we kind of had a crash course in being Noahides, because it was like 6 months from when we went to Israel to we were like, no, we're done with this. We're not Christians anymore. It was like whiplash, because I was as dyed in the wool as you can get. And then when we went back to Israel, it was 10 months later from the wedding. It was just a whole different story. It was pretty funny.
Wow. I think what's so interesting, I mean, obviously what I'm thinking, one thing, which of course is true for every one of you, is how God puts guides in your journey. A guide could be a book, like in Julie's case, a word that made her start thinking, and a book that was her guide. And in Corey, it was a friend who went out. She didn't say she became a Noahide, but she rejected Christianity, and she said something that made Corey think and move from there. And then Corey did the rest of her journey herself, seemingly. And Dixie has this Jew who's a Messianic Christian, but really was the beginning of the impetus. And here by Natalie, it's a friend who be converted, and it's also what I think is very fascinating for each person is how it's, of course, it's all the same theme, but like for Dixie said, what bothered her so much in Christianity was the idea that someone else could atone for your sins. And that always struck her as wrong. And then as she studied Torah, she's like, no, that's not what Torah says at all. And what Natalie was saying, something she was taught and accepted, and then she saw that, no, that's actually not true at all, because she saw it in the flesh, is like, well, why do we have JC? Why do we have Christianity? Because you can't live how God is telling us to live. And then he's saying, well, actually, people can, and people do, and in the 21st century, and they do so joyfully, and they have wonderful lives. And again, how everything sort of dovetails. You saw such a wonderful support system community system, support system, and then you contrasted that even subconsciously to your grandfather, to yourself, and it's like, why did they have it and we don't? What's different? What's going on that this isn't here? Is this because there's something rooted in falseness, and that's why it doesn't even pan out on the human level? Very, very fascinating how you see how God does. And of course, the question one could ask is, so does every person that gets this God-led deliverance go the whole road? Or maybe some do and then start and then stop? Or like Dixie said, some people sort of leave and then slide back. Or maybe it's hard for them also. I think maybe a very strong point, and each person maybe could think of themselves as the supports you had to keep your journey and keep going, even though, as Dixie said, you lose family, you lose friends. And maybe some of you said, no, I don't. I managed to maintain my family and friends, but I think many people don't, or don't do it as much, or there's some alienation or separation. And that's also maybe something that God gives you inside yourself or with other people, that you have the support to keep going. Natanya, we didn't hear from you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you everyone for the stories. Really fascinating. So actually for myself, it's my husband who introduced me to Noahide. And I'm not really, I'm religious. So although there is one time that I cried, it's kind of silly saying it now that, I'm saying goodbye to JC, because from that time on, I'm not gonna be, going to the church and be a Catholic. But um it's actually interesting. I talked to one rabbi, and he said, and I told him, how you became a Noahide. I was like, oh, I really did not work hard for it. I did not read, like, Julie and then Corey, Red Book and Dixie. No, I'm not into that. It's just like handed to me, really. And then she was like, oh, then it's a gift. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't see it that way. And then along the process too is that I started at ish.com. So I started with easy stories, like, small miracles, those short stories. And then kind of from there, it's becoming clear to me that I will never go back to Christianity. Even my sister, oh come on, I mean wedding. I was like, it's weird. I mean, I was like, I would just look at the pictures. I can't be there at a church. It's like, it's shallow for me. I mean, what the priest is saying is like, and then the fact that you're just sitting there, you're not allowed to ask. It's like something I don't get that. As the more I read, the more I learn. Yeah, sorry, it's not as dramatic as everyone,
No,
but
no,
that's
what
my
you're saying,
experience. Yeah.
I think Danielle had sort of a similar experience. You're saying you didn't start off as a very religious Catholic, and then your
Right.
husband found the truth and he introduced you to it, and you went along with it, and over time it became more and more meaningful to you, and more your own reality, not just his. Was he a Noahide when you met him?
Yes. Yeah, he was yeah, 3 years I think. Yeah, already in learning Hebrew. Actually, his story is really interesting. But yeah, and then he learned, when he learned to read the Bible in the original text, then he realized that oh, that transliterated version, the English is really different from the Hebrew one. It was like, okay, then he explored from there. Yeah,
Right.
but
Like
again, I just
sort of
got
similar to
yeah,
Dixie, sort of similar to Jolie, sort of similar to Melissa, who's not in the class now, but that was very much her story when she saw the Hebrew and this real translation, and then the knowing the Christian verses, and she's like, wait, how could these verses not be accurate? Our whole religion is based on text. And if the text is a lie, then what's the rest of the religion? Like, it's all built on a text. That's a lie. It's all built on a text. That's a distortion. So I think so. Danielle said she could talk now, and I think she also had, like Natanya, being given it as a gift. I like how Natanya put it. Most of us, I mean, I think we all have to earn our stripes one way or another. I don't think God lets any of us off the hook, but maybe Natanya's saying the initial movement, she just didn't have a strong religious connection, so she was able to, I mean, this person who became her husband, she probably thought was so intelligent and amazing. And this is what he found. So she's like, okay. And she went with it. And then over her own studying and over her own learning and exploring, it's just deepening and deepening. So it's not just her husband's trip, but it's really something she's taking independent ownership of. Danielle?
Yes. Sorry, I can't share my video. So I'll just say, I know we don't have a lot of time, and I know I've shared my story quite a bit in this class, but
Tonight is the night
I
we
will
want
say,
to talk about it. So this is
yeah,
a good timing.
yes, yes. Also, like you mentioned, my husband introduced me to Torah, and so I didn't grow up religious at all. And we did those celebrate like the national holidays, I guess nationally observed holidays, but there was no connection to religion around those holidays. But so that's how I grew up, and I learned Torah. Well, shouldn't say learned Torah, but my husband introduced me to Torah and then started learning. But I would say really when I started studying and learning myself was when we moved to Chicago and moved in the same area of the Jewish community, which I got to be your neighbor.
It was wonderful.
And you know, really learning Torah through the community, and also seeing, you know, like Natalie had mentioned, seeing people actually living that lifestyle. And I had just seen, so in my life, I grew up in a very small town, very, very small town. But a lot of people struggled with addiction and, you know, just a lot of really sad things that have happened in their lives and made bad choices. And I compared that to how I saw people who followed Torah, how their life was and how meaningful their life was. And so for me, I kept thinking as I was growing up, like that, I guess that's just how life was, you know? You made bad choices, bad things happened, and life was difficult. And life is, of course, difficult even still when you follow Torah, but I noticed being in the community just how much joy there was. And even though difficult things would happen, of course, in your life, but you still had that joy, you had that connection to God, and you were able to get through it. And so I don't think there was a specific thing that ever happened or that I learned about that I was like, wow, Christianity's wrong and, you know, the Torah is the truth. For me, it was very gradual. It was over time. It was really with experiences and just continuing to live my life the way that I know God wants me to, and not just the way that is most comfortable and follows like the laws of our state, for example, which I think a lot of people live like that. So
I think it's so interesting. We're again going to the idea of how God gives everyone the supports they need. They could choose or not choose to use them. But here, so Danielle is saying, she said, I'm not a intellectual seeker of truth like Corey. I wasn't embedded in Christianity, and I'm starting to explore the text like Natania's husband or Dixie or Julie. But I saw the life. You're really the only person here, besides, of course, Corey, after she made very significant choices, but the only person that had that opportunity to live in an Orthodox community, which in a sense, of course, is what triggered Natalie. Yeah. Natalie said that very much was her catalyst. That is the catalyst for Natalie, was spending a few days in an Orthodox Jewish community and saying, wait, these people live it, and you really can live it, and they're actually very happy living it. And therefore, the whole foundation of Christianity is a lie, because the whole foundation of Christianity is we needed something else because you can't live it, and people can and do. But it was almost still more intellectual. And Danielle is saying it just was like, it's like she's seeing two roads in front of her, a road of more darkness and a road of more light. And it was like, I'm walking the light, you know. Why would I walk in the darkness where I've seen people my whole life, religious or not religious, but they're still groping in darkness. And then I see people living with light. And of course we have challenges. Of course it's hard, but you have family and joy and connection to God, and something that lifts you up past, not that life doesn't give us hard things, but something that lifts you up past the hard things that you're contending with. You're still dealing with hard things, but we deal with the hard things on a different level because we know we're connected
Exactly.
to God and he's carrying us through the hard things. I remember Corey sharing a very, very hard thing she went through. And of course, it's very hard, but because of her connection to God, she was able to keep moving with it, not just fall under, but rise above. So yes, it doesn't mean that people that live Orthodox Jewish lives don't contend with hard, but it's more like how we contend with them and how we can handle them and how we, because of a relationship with God, are able to just, as we say, if you're tied above, you don't fall below. So as we're tied above, we go through the things and we don't fall. I think Dixie mentioned something which maybe we don't have time to touch on, to think about. She was saying that she had friends that left Christianity, which means, I guess, intellectually they saw the falseness in it. But then she's saying they went back to it. I don't know if they went back to it that they became Christians or they just didn't maintain themselves as Noahides.
No, let me tell you what happened. And actually, it's my daughter-in-law and my son. It's heartbreaking. But her mother was Catholic, and we were very close. And she actually came out of Christianity into the Messianic with us. And then when our son went to a couple of the meetings, and when the prayer that you pray with others, that forgive us, what do you call it? The
Takanun?
Yeah. Well, it's the one right after the Amidah. And
you're
anyway,
listing, you're confessing your sins.
Yes, that's it, the confession. And our son got so angry. He said, I am not going to confess sins for anybody. I didn't do them, and I'm not going to confess them. And he grabbed the baby and Michelle, and he said, we're leaving. They left. He called Jack, his dad, and he was so rude to his dad. And Jack was shocked. We were all shocked, but it hit him so wrong that they never came back. They gave up all their Jewish books and everything, and they never came back. And it's heartbreaking.
Go back to Christianity, or he just was not this and not this?
No, they're into Christianity now. Yeah. And and it's been a strain. We've done pretty good, with them. Other people have just pretty much rejected us because, when you reject JC, then you're a heretic, and they're not allowed to have relations with a heretic. And yeah, it's shocking. It's really shocking when this happens. And it's horrible. It's just horrible. But it's taken me years to finally, about a month ago, I finally got peace with it and said, it's their life. You've got to drop it. That's them. And you can't worry about it anymore. Pray like you always do, but you've got to, for your own sake, drop it.
You're right. We definitely know people have free choice. And that's why I'm saying that even if people have, like here, we have a class of the success stories, the people that God put it in front of you, a book as a guide, your own inquisitive mind and your pursuit of truth as a guide, friends as a guide, communities as a guide, people as a guide. But in the end of the day, you're making a lot of deep choices. And in a deep commitment for most people is to live truth with all the price tags, and especially the separation from family and friend. That's huge as price tags, or this time of year where you can feel so strongly the pervasive culture that you're separating yourself from, price tag. Or if there's parties, again, it goes back to family and friends and what everyone's doing except you, price tags. So there's God giving us the spark, and then there's the commitment to keep walking the road. And maybe initially you don't sense the price tag, but as you keep going, and it comes to the sense of like, well, am I choosing God? Am I choosing this? And I keep going back to God and not the falseness, even though there's a certain, the lights, as they twinkle outside, there's an allure, if you compare that to like the glow of a Hanukkah menorah, it's a very different light. It's a very different pull. So there's the glitz and the glow of the lights, and it's like, but wait, that's false. That's not light, that's darkness. So am I choosing darkness? Am I choosing to walk God's path, to walk the path of truth, to walk the path of connection to Him? And as Danielle says, to ultimately walk the path to a better life for me. But it takes a lot of strength. And again, I'm sure that God gives, and I feel now more and more people, and there are more and more Noahides all over the world. All over the world. Of course, we've had in our own class people from all over the world joining at various points. And there are Noahides all over the world, and I'm sure there are people that God gave a guide, gave a sign, gave an enlightenment, and maybe they walked the road for a while, and then they were like, whoa, this is really hard. This is really hard to be different than everyone else around me, because many people live in, like Julie said, a small town, an area where and most of the people that come to the class seem to live in small towns where they're the only one. And they're that light in that town, and that's why God put them there. So there's that intellectual and emotional rejection of the falseness of JC, of everything that represents, and then there's the perseverance, the commitment to walk the road. Commitment. It takes a lot of deep, deep commitment, but I agree with you, Dixie. When we see people not, and they're people close to us, and it's painful, we just say, we can pray, we can give charity, we can add in good deeds, and people have free choice. And we can't do more than that. Just say people have free choice, and that's it. Keep moving. Keep moving, because we cannot change other people's choices. We can try spiritually to do things to give merit, but we can't change other people's choices. And it creates tremendous pain when we think about it like that.
It's funny you talk about sacrifice, because I was realizing this year, the first few years without Christmas were so difficult because it's such a big deal for us growing up. I mean, one of the things that Nathan and I started dating about what I liked about him so much when we were in high school is he would sing Christmas songs any time of the year. It was awesome. But it's like I realized this year and last year, like we didn't drive around and look at lights. I have a playlist of like just not Christmas winter songs that I'll play when I want Christmas songs. It's like I never even turned it on this year. I have 2 years in a row I haven't touched it. I haven't thought about it. There's so much that we haven't done in the last couple of years without even thinking about it.
A gradual detox.
Yeah.
I have to say one thing. The hardest thing for me, and it still breaks my heart, when we would not do Christmas, my dad cried. He said, all these years we have worked so hard and given you guys everything, and we've done Christmas. And my dad wasn't even religious, but he cried. And it still to this day, it's like how heartbreaking it is. And he wasn't even religious, but that was so important to him, Christmas, that he could not understand how we could not do it.
It wasn't the religious piece that it was the sense of, this is your family, this is your culture. He sacrificed to have money, to buy you gifts, to have the nice meal, to give you a good time. It was his way of expressing, it was in his culture how he was expressing his love for you. So exactly. If he did that for you, how are you not keeping up, not the religious tradition, the tradition of family, the tradition of expressing love? And it was almost, of course, what he felt was that it was rejection of him.
It was horrible. It's heartbreaking. And it wasn't rejection of him, but he couldn't understand that,
Right. And sometimes people are given the time that they come to peace with it, and sometimes they're not. I'm sure some people here have seen families that were upset at first and then came to terms and accepted it and saw you weren't rejecting them. You're just choosing your path of truth, but it's not a rejection of them. And some people probably weren't able to accept that. And of course, it's interesting because your father wasn't a religious Christian. Why would he feel so rejected? But he felt rejected because he sacrificed for you guys to have something that you decided you didn't need. And that definitely felt for him like a rejection.
Yeah, it's still hard.
People have seen that family or friends have come around, that originally they felt rejected and then they realized they weren't, and they are more accepting and supportive of your journey?
Oh, he's, of course he's passed away now. Allah Shalom. But he finally accepted it in a sense. I mean, it disappointed him, but he let it go. It took him a little while, but a few years, but more than a few. But my mom, I mean, I guess they would always do their little Christmas thing, and we wouldn't come. But it was okay finally that we didn't come, even though the rest of the family was there. He would say, "I don't know why you guys can't come down and be sociable." And it's like, well, Dad, if you weren't celebrating Christmas, we'd be there in a minute. I said, we're there on Thanksgiving, we're there on every other one, except Easter, of course. But, I said, it's nothing against you. It's what we believe. And he understood that finally.
Well, it's good that you had Thanksgiving or other opportunities that you could join the family. So it was clear that when it's not Christian oriented, of course we come, and of course we're so happy to be part of the family. Other people have had that family that at first felt very alienated, over time felt more positive and supportive.
It was a struggle for my mom and my parents, because for such a long time, I mean, her approach to my best friend was hard enough as it was. So I was dreading having the conversation with Mom, but they're not stupid. They figured it out pretty along the way. But then the conversation with Mom and Dad was not this knockdown, drag out, tears. It was a very peaceful conversation. I mean, like I said, they were pretty clued in for a long time. They're pretty smart people. So, I was very thankful to Hashem that it wasn't the dramatic explosion.
It wasn't as dramatic an explosion. It was like, okay, this is your path. It's not our path, but it's your path.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a blessing. That's definitely a blessing. And hopefully people over time, going back to what Danielle said, see the beauty in your life. And as they see that your life is a good life and is a life where you feel so strong because of your connection to God, hopefully that gives them also a sense of greater peace with the choices you're making.
I think that makes a big difference. Yeah.
Sorry, Natalie, I just want to mention real quick. So we've changed names, and then it took my parents at least a decade, and I'm really touched because I'm not asking them to call me with Netanya, and then sorry, I cry, but my mom called me first Tanya, and then eventually she's calling me Netanya, as in consistently. And then for my in-laws, they're preacher, I'm Christian preacher. So it took them 15 years. Yeah, now they're calling us, yeah, Asher. And then I think it's more of probably they see that um we're happy somehow, at peace, not just happy that you cause envy to other people, but I think it's more on the we are at peace of what we believe in. We always just listen to them, respect their I mean their value and what they can contribute and stuff. But yeah, it really, I mean, it's really a big deal for me. I mean, especially from my mom, calling me Netanya. I don't know. It's just really amazing.
It is a big deal.
Amazing.
It is a big deal. Just like I think I would compare it to in the Jewish world, when someone who was raised not religious becomes religious and takes on a Jewish name, takes on, if they weren't given, or uses the name they were given at birth that they never used. And it's the hardest thing for a parent to change the name they're calling their child, especially if they never gave that child that name. And it's like, wait, I named you. What's this? Who's that? And it's a tremendous subtle expression of acceptance of you and of your life, to call you the name you've chosen instead of the name they gave you. Especially you're saying your in-laws, and they're entrenched in the church and they're seeing your peace. That's how we define happiness. We use the word happy. When a person has inner peace, that's really the core of happiness. So when they're seeing your inner peace, that means you have real deal happiness, and they're acknowledging that. They're using your Jewish names, they're acknowledging that. So it is a very big statement, and it could take 10 years, it could take 15 years. But after 15 years that they come around is beautiful, because some people don't. Some people are just going to stay very stuck. So it's beautiful that that took 15 years, but they came around. Very precious. Okay. Anyone want to add anything else?
I would say never underestimate Hashem, because it's so funny. Like this year, we weren't going to get to Washington to visit my parents hardly at all. And yet, some way, somehow, last minute, we were there for Rosh Hashanah and we were there for Hanukkah. And we had Rosh Hashanah with my parents, with the dinner with a whole bunch of our family. And we were there for 2 nights of Hanukkah and we lit candles at their house. Like, what are you doing there, God?
He's saying, I want you to spread the light. I want you to spread the light. I want you to spread the light. And of course, every Noahide has that mission with whoever they interact with. It might be family, it might be friends, it might be people that are helping them, giving them services, clients, co-workers, neighbors, grocery clerks, fridge repairman. But God says, I gave you the gift of light. And there's a world of 8 billion people. I want you to spread the light. So this was very wonderful. Corey, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the most important thing, because I think, when you find something precious like that truth, you want to share it to the people that you love, and you end up pushing them away because they're not really at a place to hear it. And I think that you just need to live your life, and they will be attracted to the beauty of your peace and your happiness. And then that'll open them eventually the last questions if they desire it. And then that's all we can do.
Very true. Very wise, because sometimes you are so excited and you so much want to share, and they're like feeling very threatened and very uncomfortable, and it's very alienating. And when you're just living, and as Danielle said, and as you're saying, living, a life that's different. There's a certain resonance of truth, resonance of beauty, resonance of inner peace, resonance of God. And that's very attractive. And you never
important not to, push it on them or help make them feel rejected on what they're doing. That, that it's wrong or anything like that. I think to love them where they're at is the most important, because if they feel threatened that you're better than them, then they're not going to be open to any of it.
Very true. Very true. And then your shining example is very alluring, is very attractive. Is like, whoa, I like what she has. What does she have? Let me find out. Never asked any questions, but what does she have? What does she believe? That's making her seem so different than the rest of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And I think there's like some, and sometimes you just say comments, little comments here, little comments there, to like tweak something in their brain. Maybe put a little spark plug in that's going to make someone think about, mull over something, and maybe question you, or maybe look for other places for answers. And there's that part of being a shining example. And definitely a shining example is a very loud, quiet pull. Very loud, quiet message. Absolutely. 100%. Anyone else? Anyone else have something they'd like to add? Okay, well, this was our spiritual victory over darkness tonight. And this is celebrating our victories and creating victory of truth, of God, over lies, over darkness. Each one of you very entrenched or very nominally there, but each one of you is a survivor of the lies and the darkness, got out of the lies and the darkness, and hopefully your stories and you're telling your stories tonight should help squash those lies and darkness for other people as well.